My name is Kelly Delaney. I'm 31 years old, and here's how my story begins. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday night, the kind where the apartment felt unusually calm. I was in the kitchen making a late snack, half distracted, half humming. Some tune I didn't even recognize. My boyfriend Jack sat on the couch with his phone in hand, smiling at whatever he was typing. Nothing about it seemed suspicious. Jack was always glued to his phone, constantly chatting with coworkers and friends. I had never once questioned it. When I walked over to ask if he wanted anything, I wasn't trying to sneak up on him. I simply moved in naturally the way I always did. But the angle of his phone shifted at the exact wrong moment for him and the exact life-changing moment for me. The screen lit up brightly, and the message he was typing came into full view. The words were sharp and unmistakable. She still has no clue, LOL. Playing the perfect boyfriend while you're giving me what she never could. See you Thursday at the usual spot. I froze mid-step. It was as if the world snapped into silence. For a breathless second, I wondered if I had misread it. But he kept typing, adding another line. She's so clueless about everything. Makes it almost too easy. The apartment felt colder, like the walls themselves pulled away from me. I didn't gasp or scream. Instead, something in me locked into place, a cold, steady clarity that felt terrifyingly calm. I stepped backward quiet enough that he didn't notice, and then deliberately rattled a glass in the kitchen like I had just walked in. "Hey, Jack," I said, forcing normalcy into my voice. "Want some chips?" He instantly locked his phone and turned around with a relaxed smile. "No thanks, Kel. I'm good." I nodded and pretended to continue making my snack, my hands trembling underneath the counter, even as I kept my movements controlled. 10 minutes later, he kissed my cheek and told me he was exhausted. "I'm heading to bed," he said. I smiled back, even though the inside of my chest felt like it was collapsing in slow motion. "Okay, I'll be up soon." He walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and disappeared behind it like nothing was wrong. I waited until I heard the subtle shift of his breathing, slow, steady, completely unaware, before I began moving. Every detail of our life together suddenly reassembled itself in my mind with a new, brutal clarity. The lease was in my name. I had signed it 6 months before Jack ever entered my life. 70% of the furniture was mine from before we met, and the rest had been purchased on my credit card even if we'd picked it out together. As for the expensive ring he'd given me, it was still legally a conditional gift. No future marriage meant no obligation on my part. I opened my laptop, unlocked my phone, and began making calls. First, I called my childhood best friend who owns a moving company. "I need you tomorrow morning," I said, keeping my voice steady, only because the alternative was collapsing. "Very early." Next, I called my cousin Layla, who works as a paralegal. "I need some legal guidance," I whispered. Last, I called my landlord to confirm what I already knew: Jack had no claim to the apartment. By 2 a.m., I had a complete plan. I stood at the bedroom doorway watching him sleep peacefully, unaware that the illusion he had relied on for months was finally cracking apart. His face looked innocent in sleep, almost childlike. It made the betrayal feel even more grotesque. This was a man who typed about me behind my back like I was a joke, a burden, something to mock for entertainment. The bedroom door still had an old-fashioned hook latch on the outside, something the previous tenant had left behind. We had always meant to remove it, but never did. We never used it until that night. I closed the door gently, my hand pausing only once before pushing through that last inch of hesitation. Then I slid the latch into place. It wasn't strong enough to trap him forever, but it would hold long enough for what needed to happen. Just before dawn, I heard the rumble of a truck pulling into the parking lot. My stomach twisted, but I didn't waver. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was about reclaiming my dignity from someone who threw it away without a thought. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the world was holding its breath with me. That morning would be the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped being the woman who trusted blindly and became the woman who refused to be played for a fool ever again. The movers arrived at 6:45 a.m., just as the sky was shifting from deep blue to the soft haze of early morning. I greeted them quietly in the hallway so Jack wouldn't wake to unfamiliar voices echoing through the apartment. My best friend's voice was hushed but incredulous. "Kelly, you're actually doing this?" I nodded once, firm and steady, in a way I hadn't felt in years. Yes, everything except the bed he's sleeping in and his personal items. The rest goes. The apartment door clicked softly behind us as they stepped inside, surveying the living room, filled with furniture that suddenly felt foreign and tainted. Every piece had been a compromise, something chosen to fit his aesthetic, something that had never fully belonged to me. This time, it was all going where it truly belonged, away from him. We started with the biggest items first: the couch, the bookshelf, the dining table, the entertainment center. The men worked swiftly, efficiently, and within minutes the place was alive with motion. Thuds, soft dragging sounds, muffled footsteps, quiet enough to keep me from panicking, loud enough to make my pulse race every second the latch held. Around 7:30 a.m., just when the last piece of the living room furniture was being loaded onto the dolly, I heard the shift in his voice behind the bedroom door. A confused murmur. Another. Then the inevitable click of panic. "Hello, Kel." The door's stuck. "Hey, Kelly, something's wrong with the door." There was a sharp rattle, then pounding. "Kelly." "Open the door." "What's going on?" I stepped closer, keeping my voice even. "Morning, Jack." "Why is the door locked?" "What are you doing out there?" "Movers are here," I answered calmly. "Movers? What movers open this damn door?" "I will when they're finished." "What finished with what?" "Moving out my things." There was a stunned pause so long I wondered if he had fainted. Then the pounding resumed, harder, frantic. "You can't do this. This is insane. Open the door right now." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to antagonize him, but because there was nothing left worth responding to. His anger, his confusion, his excuses, they no longer held power over me. The movers continued now, carrying my custom-built kitchen table, the one he always dismissed as too girly. The men exchanged glances but didn't question anything. I was grateful for that. 15 minutes later, the last box was carried out, and the apartment was stripped down to nearly nothing. The bed he was on, his dresser, his clothes, and the hollow echoes of what used to be our shared life. I unhooked the latch slowly, then stepped back. The door burst open, and Jack stumbled out, hair disheveled, face, red phone in hand like a weapon. His eyes widened at the empty living room, his shock melting into rage and fear. "What the hell happened? Where is everything? You can't just take..." I held up my phone and tapped the screen once. The screenshot glowed brightly between us. The message he'd typed, the words that had split my life in two. His face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. "That's Kelly, that's not..." "You took my phone." "I didn't have to," I said calmly. "You were texting in the living room. I walked up behind you. I read what you wrote." "It's not what it looks like," he sputtered. "It was just texting, just harmless." "You literally said she's giving you what I never could." "That sounds pretty physical, Jack." He reached for me instinctively, but I stepped back. Not out of fear, out of clarity. "You have 30 days to find a new place. It's the legal notice period. I'll be staying with Layla for now." "You can't be serious, Kelly, please. Don't do this. We can fix it." "Fix what?" "The part where you bragged about me being clueless, or the part where you said mocking me, made it easier for you to cheat." His eyes filled with the desperation I had never seen before. But it wasn't sorrow. It was the panic of a man losing access to comfort, to the infrastructure of a life he'd benefited from without appreciating. "This is illegal," he snapped. "I'll call the police. I'll tell them you locked me in here." "Go ahead," I replied. "The lease is in my name. The furniture is legally mine, and you have a phone. You are in no danger." "You're a monster," he screamed. "Maybe," I said quietly. "Or maybe I'm just done letting someone treat me like a fool." I picked up the bag I had packed the night before, walked toward the door, and opened it without another word. Jack shouted after me, but his voice faded the moment the door clicked shut behind me. The world outside was cool, bright, and startlingly quiet. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the smallest flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I had barely been gone 6 hours when the first shockwave hit. At 2:14 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach clench. Local police department. I stepped out onto my cousin Layla's balcony before answering, bracing myself against the railing. "Ms. Delaney. This is Officer Ramirez. We received a call about a domestic disturbance at your residence." My breath caught for half a second. "What kind of disturbance, officer?" "Your boyfriend Jack claims you locked him in a bedroom and removed all his belongings." "Of course he did." I kept my voice steady. "I can explain everything." And I did. Lease under my name, furniture receipts, his messages, the reason behind my reaction. I even offered to forward the screenshot of his texts. The officer sighed, not unkindly. Legally speaking, Ms. Delaney locking someone in a room, even briefly, can be considered unlawful restraint. I need to give you a verbal warning. I understand, I said quietly. It won't happen again. He paused. For what it's worth, I saw the screenshot you sent. That was brutal. I'm sorry. When the call ended, I stood in silence for a long moment, the city breeze brushing against my face. The warning stung, but at least it wasn't escalating further. I had made one impulsive mistake locking the door, but everything else had been planned, legal, and necessary. By evening, the second shockwave hit. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from mutual friends, coworkers, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Screenshots of Jack's social media posts poured in. He was painting himself as a victim. According to him, I had kidnapped him, stripped the apartment bare, and emotionally abused him for months. The comments were flooded with sympathy for him. But I didn't type a single word in my defense. I simply posted one image into a group chat we both shared, a clean, unedited screenshot of his message to his ex-girlfriend. No commentary, no accusation, no story, just the truth. Within minutes, half the people who had just defended him suddenly went silent. The third shockwave came from an unexpected direction. Layla walked into the living room that night holding her phone. "You're going to want to see this," she said, sliding it into my hand. It was a report from her friend who worked in HR at Jack's old company. His affair partner wasn't some random woman. It was his ex-girlfriend, Melissa, someone he had a long and messy history with. He'd talked about her before, vaguely, never with positive emotion. She was unstable, dramatic, jealous. He claimed she'd made his life miserable. Turns out they had reconnected months ago quietly, and Melissa was not single. She was married. Her husband had found receipts, hotel bookings, and suspicious text history. While I was packing up my life, he was apparently packing his own suitcase. He threw her out of the house that same day. Jack's betrayal suddenly became part of a much larger, messier story. Still processing it all, I sat on Layla's couch, scrolling through the pieces of my unraveling relationship, trying to piece together how long I'd been living in a lie. 4 years of trust collapsing into hours of chaos. The next day, I received a text from Jack. "I'm keeping the ring. It was a gift." The audacity made me laugh. The ring was expensive, a conditional promise. And conditions matter. I replied. Legally, a promise ring, given in anticipation of marriage, is a conditional gift. No marriage means it must be returned. You have 48 hours to drop it off. If not, I'll file a report. He fired back instantly. "You're a vindictive piece of garbage." I silenced the conversation, and I waited. 48 hours passed with no ring. So I filed the report. I thought that would be the end of that issue until the next morning when someone knocked on Layla's door. Layla opened it, then stepped aside, eyes wide. Standing there was Melissa's mother, holding a small velvet ring box. She looked exhausted, defeated, almost embarrassed. "Jack gave this to my daughter," she said flatly. "She doesn't want to see the police involved. Please, just take it." I accepted the ring without a word. Before leaving, she whispered, "You deserve better than him, and better than her." When the door closed, I sank into the nearest chair, gripping the box. A strange wave of sadness washed over me. Sadness not for Jack, but for the version of myself who once loved him without doubt. But I didn't have long to sit with it, because the fallout kept spreading. By the end of the week, a new thread of gossip reached me through 2 different friends. Jack and Melissa were now officially together, apparently madly in love, presenting themselves as a tragic pair, wronged by everyone else. I couldn't help it. I laughed again, not from humor, but from the absurdity of 2 people trying to build something out of the ruins they created themselves. Meanwhile, on my end, the consequences continued to shift in my favor. The wedding expenses, I contacted every vendor. Most couldn't refund deposits, but the venue owner, after seeing the screenshot I provided, refunded half out of sympathy. "I'm not taking full payment from someone going through this," he said gently. I still lost a few $1,000s, but it was cheaper than a marriage built on lies. The real cost. The emotional one came late at night when I finally lay in a borrowed bed in Layla's guest room and stared at the ceiling. Betrayal has a way of echoing long after the initial blow. I could still hear Jack's voice from that morning, confused, angry, terrified of losing everything he took for granted. But I was losing something too, not just a partner, but the future I thought I was building. It felt like someone had abruptly rewritten the script of my life without warning. And I was left trying to figure out what my next chapter would look like. I didn't know it then, but the worst of the fallout was still ahead. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a slow-motion car crash, predictable, inevitable, and still somehow shocking in every new angle of disaster Jack managed to create for himself. It began with the rent. 3 days after the police warning, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "I can't afford rent this month. You need to help me." I stared at the message for a long moment. Even after everything he had done, he still spoke to me as if I owed him stability, comfort, and financial rescue. I typed back only one sentence. "Your financial situation is not my responsibility anymore." His reply came fast and dripping with entitlement. "You always paid most of it." I answered honestly, "Because we were together and I chose to. We're not together anymore. Figure it out." The meltdown that followed was predictable rage accusations, guilt-tripping bargaining, but none of it worked. He made zero attempt to pay rent. He simply assumed someone, me, his parents, the universe, would bail him out. The landlord called me a week later. "Ms. Delaney, your boyfriend says you agreed to cover his portion." "I'm not his partner anymore," I said calmly. "He's not on the lease. His 30-day notice is almost up." The landlord sighed. "Then he needs to be out by the end of the month. If he's not, we'll begin eviction proceedings." "That's between you and him," I replied. The next wave came from Jack's family. One evening, Layla opened her apartment door and stepped back as 3 figures pushed their way into the hallway. Jack's mother, father, and younger sister. Their expressions were a volatile mix of anger and desperation. His father spoke first. "We need to talk about making this right." "There's nothing to fix," I replied. "He cheated. I ended the relationship." His mother jabbed her finger toward me. "You left him with nothing." "I left him with his belongings," I corrected. "And 30 days of legal notice. That's more than generous." His sister tried the dramatic route. "You abandoned him when he needed you most." I almost laughed. He needed me when he was texting his ex-girlfriend, or when he was mocking me behind my back. That shut her up quickly. His father tried a final approach. "At least help him move somewhere. He's overwhelmed." "He is a grown man with a job," I said. "And overwhelming other people is something he's been good at for years. I'm done." They left in a storm of muttered insults and slammed doors. But their visit didn't shake me. If anything, it steeled me further. Then came the moment I didn't expect. The day I returned to the apartment with the landlord to check the unit before Jack's notice period ended. The smell hit us first. Something chemical. Sharp. Off. When we walked inside, my stomach dropped. Jack had turned the apartment into a scene of petty revenge. Paint was splattered across the carpet in the bedroom where the bed had been. It looked intentional, poured, not spilled. Several light fixtures were smashed. A cabinet door in the bathroom hung crooked, barely attached. The mirror had deep scratches carved into it, including a message etched with something sharp. The kitchen sink was clogged with what looked like concrete mix, hard gray dried in the drain, like he'd poured it and walked away. The landlord's face went red as he took photos. "This is at least $2,500 in damages," he muttered. "Maybe more. I'll send him the bill." I said, "If he doesn't pay, take him to small claims." "Oh, I will," the landlord replied. "This is vandalism. He'll lose." And Jack did lose. 3 weeks later, he was sued for the damages and didn't even show up to the court date. Default judgment. $3,100 in debt. Wage garnishment approved. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly I felt numb. Betrayal takes longer to heal than anger. Meanwhile, news about his affair partner, Melissa, kept trickling in. Her divorce was accelerating fast. Her husband had produced hotel receipts and messages in court. The judge sided heavily with him. She lost their house, full custody, and a large portion of marital assets. And Jack, he had chosen to attach himself to a woman now drowning in her own disaster. The two of them moved into Melissa's parents' basement. According to mutual friends, they fought constantly about money, about blame, about everything. Jack was no longer the clever, smug man texting behind my back. He was stressed, broke, and cornered. Actions, consequences, balance. Meanwhile, I was doing the opposite of falling apart. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment downtown, a place that felt like mine in every way the old one never did. I furnished it slowly, thoughtfully, carefully choosing pieces I actually liked. The space felt airy, warm, and refreshingly free of pretense. I blocked Jack's number and muted every social media platform. I started therapy not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I ignored so many warning signs and why betrayal hit me so deeply in places I never acknowledged. I worked longer hours, and oddly enough, the chaos sharpened my drive. My boss noticed. I was given new responsibilities, new opportunities, and eventually a higher position with a raise. My life was no longer defined by a relationship. It was defined by me. One evening, as I sat on my new living room floor assembling furniture, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, my life felt quiet. Not empty, not lonely, just peacefully, beautifully quiet. But Jack's downfall still wasn't done. The final collapse of his narrative was coming, and it would be far more public than he ever imagined. The collapse of Jack's false narrative didn't happen in private. It happened loudly, publicly, and so spectacularly that even I couldn't have scripted it better. It began with a Reddit post. About 3 weeks after the court judgment, someone still unknown to me submitted a detailed story on a relationship advice subreddit. It described a woman who discovered her boyfriend's affair, quietly removed all her belongings from the shared apartment, locked him in the bedroom to avoid confrontation, and walked out of the relationship with her dignity intact. The post went viral overnight. 25,000 plus upvotes, thousands of comments, endless discussion threads. The comments were a brutal roast of the cheating boyfriend, my cheating boyfriend. People dissected every message he sent to Melissa. They mocked the "she still has no clue" LOL line like it was a meme. They tore apart his entitlement, his arrogance, his lies. And the best part, almost no one realized I was the woman in the story. But Jack realized, and so did Melissa. Within hours, they began posting their own side of the story on social media, trying to fight the tidal wave. Jack claimed he had been abused, emotionally humiliated, and left with nothing. Melissa insisted she had been manipulated into the affair. But the internet is ruthless with liars. Someone in the comments dug up the screenshot I had shared weeks earlier, the original "she has no clue" message. Then someone else linked the court documents from Jack's vandalism case. Another posted screenshots from Melissa's divorce filings. And within a day, their entire victim narrative crumbled. The truth didn't just come out, it detonated. Jack deleted every social media account he had. Melissa followed soon after. And suddenly the world went quiet. A week later, I was at a small bookstore cafe when a familiar voice called my name. I turned to see Madison, Melissa's younger sister, standing behind me with a coffee cup in hand. She looked hesitant, almost nervous. "Kelly, can we talk?" Part of me wanted to walk away, but something in her expression made me pause. I nodded toward an empty table. She sat down and exhaled shakily. "I just want to say, I'm sorry for everything my sister did, and everything Jack did. We didn't know how bad it was until we saw the messages, until the divorce documents came out." "I appreciate that," I said quietly. Madison nodded. "Melissa keeps saying you overreacted, but honestly, you didn't react enough. Most people would have set his stuff on fire." I laughed at that, really laughed, for the first time in a while. She lowered her voice. "Our whole family knows what really happened now. Mom is still in denial, but the rest of us, we get it. My sister sabotages everything. You just happen to be her latest collateral damage." Her honesty struck a chord in me. For months, I had silently carried the weight of Jack's betrayal, like it said something about me, my worth, my judgment, my ability to choose partners. Hearing someone from the other side acknowledge the truth lightened something inside me I didn't even know I was still carrying. Before she left, Madison gave me a small smile. "You're going to be okay, you know. Probably better than okay." And strangely, I believed her. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that, but it did begin to settle into something stable, warm, and real. I furnished my new apartment fully deep green velvet sofa, warm lighting plants I actually learned to take care of. The space reflected me, not the woman I molded myself into for Jack. I kept going to therapy, slowly untangling the knots I had ignored for years. My therapist helped me understand why I tolerated so much, why betrayal hit so deep, and how to rebuild trust, mostly trust in myself. Work picked up. I earned a promotion and started leading clients I had once felt too inexperienced to handle. The confidence I'd lost in that relationship began returning piece by piece. And then there was the barbecue. A friend invited me to a casual weekend gathering. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted to test what life might look like surrounded by people who didn't know the story, who didn't see me as the girl who got cheated on. That's where I met Evan. He worked as a paralegal, sharp-minded but soft-spoken, with an easy smile that didn't try too hard. We talked about books, travel, food, the ridiculousness of dating apps. I didn't tell him the full story, not yet, but I mentioned a breakup. He didn't pity me. He didn't probe. He simply said, "Sometimes losing someone is just the universe clearing space for something better." We exchanged numbers, and for the first time in a long time, I felt cautiously hopeful. Not rushed, not pressured, just quietly curious about what could come next. One night after a long day at work, I sat on my new couch and looked around at the peaceful warmth of my apartment. The glow from the lamps, the faint city hum through the windows, the plants thriving on the windowsill. It all felt like a life I had built, not a life I had clung to. And I realized something. The day I saw Jack's message, the relationship ended in that single moment. Everything that followed the movers, the confrontation, the police call, the lawsuit, the public meltdown wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was cleanup. I wasn't destroying anything. I was clearing the wreckage of something already dead. Jack thought I was clueless. He thought he could lie with no consequences. He thought I would forgive anything.